Good afternoon, everybody. We're really excited that you have joined us today. This is our final webinar of 2019, Dyscalculia Mathematic Learning Disability, and will be brought to by West Texas A&M University and Dr. Shin. We'll let her get started here in just a few minutes, but before we do, let's go over a few webinar basics and tell you who we are. So I'm Megan Sanders, Evaluation Specialist for Partners Resource Network, and joining me today is Christina Henning, who's the Director of Statewide Services. Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. We have the PATH Project, the PIN Project, and the TEAM Project. We are federally funded by a grant from Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs, known as OSEP. And we provide training, education, information, referrals, technical assistance, and emotional support for parents of children with disabilities birth to 26 years of age. Right, a few things. We are doing a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Because our chat box can get a little convoluted at times with comments or IT type questions, we want to make sure we don't overlook any questions meant for Dr. Shin. So I want to encourage you to go over to your menu bar, and that's either going to be in the top or bottom of your screen, depending on how your Zoom setup is. But there's a box that has a Q in it and says Q&A. If you have questions for Dr. Shin throughout the presentation, if you will drop those in the Q&A box, we will make sure we get those addressed at the end of today's presentation. All right, other things, it is being recorded and it will be available on our website tomorrow afternoon. So you'll be able to view this or share it with anybody who was not able to attend today. I think that knocks out all of our typical webinar questions. But if you have anything else, feel free to drop that in the chat box and one of us will answer it. All right, so this is Dr. Shin. And Dr. Shin joined the College of Education and Social Sciences at West Texas A&M University in 2019. She received a BA in Special Education and English Language and Literature from Iowa Women's University in 2006, an MA in Special Education from the University of Texas at Austin in 2009, and a PhD in Special Education from the University of Texas in Austin in 2013. Dr. Shin teaches special education teacher preparation and educational diagnostician courses, including learning and behavior disorders, theories of learning disabilities and emotional behavioral disorders, and assistive technology. She made numerous presentations on teaching mathematics to students with learning disabilities and developing web-based mathematic apps as instructional tools in the classroom. So thank you, Dr. Shin. I am ready to hand it over to you.
Thank you for introducing me. Hello, good afternoon. It's glad to meet and through this webinar today. Today, I will go over Dyscalculia Mathematics Learning Disability. So basically, I will go over 4 basic concepts, definitions, risk factors, characteristics, and some evidence-based mathematics practices. First of all, there are several inconsistent definitions across nations and across authorities. However, there are some consistently agreeable debates on these topics. Like dyslexia, there are many student population who have dyscalculia, but these dyscalculia groups is kind of overlooked and also under-identified. And according to some groups, it is called that approximately 5 to 80% of school-aged children demonstrate math learning disabilities. And in this population, we could include those individuals who have dyscalculia. And also, students have difficulties in several cognitive deficits as well as some math performances. And also, there are a lot of co-overlapping between those populations who have dyslexia, dyscalculia, or some type of other hyperactivity and attention disabilities. So there are some co-occurrence and comorbidity issues in this area. Now, let's move on to the concept and definition of dyscalculia. What is dyscalculia? How can we identify children with dyscalculia? Some of you who have experiences meeting with it, and also who have family members, and also who have taught these children who have struggled with mathematics, you will kind of have the meaning and concept of dyscalculia. In fact, there, as I mentioned in the previous slide, there is no single legal or federal definitions for this. So here today, I would like to go over some general definitions that covers the meaning of dyscalculia. First of all, there are some debate and essential features when we define dyscalculia. There are several different terminologies and different criteria across different researchers and even different countries. And in this big picture of dyscalculia, some people include them or call them as specific learning disabilities in mathematics calculation or mathematics problem solving. You might have heard some people call this population as specific learning disorders with impairment in general mathematics. And regardless of the different uses for calling these target children and students, there is some general and agreeable features. We put that consider dyscalculia as one type of neurodevelopmental disorder. So neurodevelopmental disorder means that disorder that manifests even starting the school age. So even it could be manifested in the kindergarten age, or even after right after the entering the elementary school. So the onset of the age can be early as much. And also, this dyscalculia is considered as a specific type of specific learning disorder, and it go over the lifelong condition. So we can understand kind of the general features of what dyscalculia is. Next, let's look at who coined this term. So developmental dyscalculia was first introduced by a researcher named Cox, and this term was coined in 1974. If you think that dyslexia was first introduced in like 1930 and 40, this term is quite new compared to other type of learning disability. So according to this researcher, developmental dyscalculia is defined as a structural disorder in the area of math. And also this deficit is related to some genetic or congenital disorder. And also there is some mathematical difficulties and compared to other same age groups. And also we cannot really say that this dyscalculia is because of some general mental functions. And let's take a look at some other definitions and meanings. This is one example of classification of identifying those dyslexia or dyscalculia or special learning disorder. So DSM is a diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders. And ICD is International Classification of Disease. Currently, the latest version of DSM is 5th edition, and ICD is 11th edition. So these two guidelines provide some classification and criteria for several different disabilities. So here today, we will look at some examples that cover the concept of specific learning disabilities in math and also dyscalculia. So if you compare these two guidelines together, there is some overlapped meaning and some shared meaning. For example, DSM-V and ICD-11, they all mention that dyscalculia and special learning disorder in math is one type of neurodevelopmental disorders. And people have manifests and difficulty in math. And those math areas include number sense and memorization of arithmetic facts, or some issues in fluent calculation, or even math reasoning. And also, we can consider that students can manifest in certain type of math area and math performances, but not all those areas. And regardless of those performances, students with dyscalculia show that they have substantially lower performances compared to their chronological age groups. And this impairment in mathematics should not or explained by any other disabilities, such as intellectual disability, sensory, hearing like a visual impairment. Or this impairment in mathematics should not because of the lack of proficiency in language or lack of opportunity to receive enough education at school. So this is some kind of shared meaning and consistently mentioned definitions. But there are some differences that we call the terminology. For example, DSM-5 call that this population as specific learning disorder in math, and ICD call that this dyscalculia is one part of developmental learning disorder. So you can consider that there is some different uses for the terminology as well here. Now, let's look at the meaning according to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So this IDEA definition provides the meaning in the field of education. So here, according to the IDEA 2004, specific learning disability means a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes, and individuals demonstrate some difficulties in their thinking, speaking, reading, writing, or do mathematical calculation. And in this IDEA, which is federal definition of specific learning disability, it also provides some inclusionary disability. So specific learning disability includes some kind of brain injury, dyslexia, or developmental aphasia. Even though this act didn't really provide or included dyscalculia under this act, we can consider that dyscalculia can be included in this definition. And this is some regulations which published in 2006. So right now you might have heard that when we assess a student with special learning disability, we emphasize that and check, did the student really receive enough education and received some scientifically validated instruction from school. That way, we can say the student really far behind their age groups or grade level standards. So for example, here, let's say that some students could have difficulties in listening comprehension or basic reading skills. Likewise, some students can have difficulty in mathematical calculation and mathematics problem solving. So even though in the definition of the IDEA, they didn't include mathematics calculation or mathematics problem solving as one type of inclusionary disability. We can say that students have the meaning here that included here. And let's take a look another information here. So we can consider that students have difficulties in different area of cognitive characteristics. So now take a look at risk factors of dyscalculia. These diagrams showed some indirect or direct risk factors that affect academic skill deficit. That include neurobiological factors, core cognitive process factors, and behavioral psychological factors and environmental factors. Here, I will focus on neurobiological factors and core cognitive process factors. For example, there are some generic core neurobiological factors that really play an important role in learning something. This slide showed the left hemisphere, our brain. In the frontal lobe, this frontal lobe plays a role of thinking and reasoning and memory and speaking. So some individuals and students who have difficulties in recognizing information or thinking, we can consider that the area is related to the function of frontal lobe. And in the left side of our brain, there is temporal lobe. In the temporal lobe, there are two main functions, Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Broca's area is more likely related to work of word fluency. And Wernicke's area is related to the work of word recognition and understanding. So when students with dyscalculia have this reading disability as well, it is likely that they could have some limitation in this area too. And in the backside of our brain, there is occipital lobe. That is about vision and color blindness of our brain. And in the lateral top of our brain, there is parietal lobe. So many people say that even though there are some generic cognitive and brain functioning underlying our learning, this parietal lobe is specifically related to the deficit in math. And this parietal lobe is related to the work of understanding spatial relationship. And also, when students have some abnormality in the parietal lobe, it is likely that they have difficulties in recognizing math symbols and math calculation. So these can be considered one risk factors. Now, let's take a look at some other core cognitive processes. First of all, let's take a look at the working memory model. So there are three components here: visual-spatial working memory, phonological working memory, and central executive working memory. So phonological loop working memory is about the storage and remembering the information related to the text or digits. And visual spatial working memory is about the remembering some mental images. And central executive working memory is about coordinating and interacting these two above working memories together. Many students who have difficulty in accepting and remembering the new and concepts, they were likely that they have some difficulties in this working memory, especially in the area of visual spatial or central executive working memory. And long-term memory is about keeping information in a longer period of time. So for example, if we remember information with some series of context, we can remember the information longer time. And also, information processing speed is another core cognitive processing types. So information processing speed means that how fast we can count the numbers. And metacognition is about how well we can organize data or how well we can predict or evaluate problem-solving situation. So these areas can be considered some core and generic cognitive factors that affect our learning. Now, let's look at some related characteristics. Here, we will look at some examples together. So, let's take a look at this slide. How fast can you count these dots? Some might take a few seconds, or some might take longer. This information processing speed really depends on what arithmetic strategies we have, or how fast you can count. So when students have some advanced math skills, they know how to chunking, how to grouping. In that way, we can really reduce the counting time. And this is another example that we can check which number is larger. Let's say children really understand that we are asking the value of the number only, not the size. Given the context, many students who have dyslexia will kind of confusing with the value of the number as the size. So in the right side, 7 and 9, it is more likely that students are choosing the 9 is greater than 7. But in the case of left example, many students with dyscalculia, they confuse that because 3 is the larger size, they consider the size means the value of the number. So let's take this concept together and take a look at some examples that I conducted in the previous years. So I want to share some mathematical performances and cognitive performances. And I compared how students with mathematics learning disabilities different from some other students who have no learning disabilities or who have both reading and math disabilities together. And also I compared them with the groups who have ADHD. First of all, these groups with mathematics learning disabilities include those identified as having dyscalculia. So here, this math learning disabilities that I'm talking right now means little broader population. For example, children with mathematics learning disabilities generally have a significantly lower performance than those who have no learning disabilities. And between students with mathematics learning disabilities and ADHD, they shared some similarity in their cognitive functioning. However, in the metacognition part, students with learning disability showed significantly better performances than the students with ADHD. And I also compared how students with mathematics learning disabilities differ from those who have both reading and mathematics difficulties together. So first of all, they showed some similarity in their general cognitive functioning. However, children with mathematics learning disabilities only showed better performances in the word problem solving. That means that we can provide more support for the word problem solving when students have reading and math difficulties together. Last, let's look at some evidence-based practices. So what should we focus when we teach students? There are some people emphasize procedure knowledge is more important than conceptual understanding. But if you take a look at this example together, you will see students need to understand the procedure as well as the conceptual understanding together. And this is some of those practice guides recommended by Institute of Education Sciences. So I want to share some evidence-based practices which found to be evidence-based. Explicit and systematic instruction, range and sequence of examples, heuristic strategies, and concrete and visual representation. First of all, explicit and systematic instruction provide teacher-led modeling, provide a lot of questioning opportunities to students. Also, this explicit and systematic instruction provide and let students self-evaluate and self-review of their work. And the range of different examples provide some good recommendation for this. For example, when we teach mathematics vocabulary, we can use this kind of graphic organizer. So for example, by comparing example and non-example together, we can show how these two concepts similar or different with each other. And CACA means concrete and semi-concrete and abstract. When we introduce math concepts, it's important that we provide concrete, the basic physical manipulative first, and then goes to representational pictures next. And then by students go through the meaning behind this math, we can introduce the abstract, the mathematical calculation at the end. So this is the systematical representation of examples. Next, heuristic strategy means the use of cognitive and metacognitive strategies. So in the previous slide, I mentioned that a lot of students with dyscalculia struggle with metacognitive functioning. So by helping students to go through some cognitive strategies, the steps of problem solving, we can guide them to remember how to solve problems. For example, the STAR strategies is one example of cognitive strategies. Search, translate, answer, and review the solution. Even though we know what to start, in many cases, students can have difficulties in remembering the steps. So by using the mnemonic strategies, we can let students remember the steps way better. Last is about the concrete and visual representation. In here, I want to share some manipulative instruction which use a physical object when we teach mathematics. And the second concept is of the use of visual representation. So in the past, we really rely on the use of 2D diagrams only. But right now, with the development of technology, we can use the three-dimensional visual representation, which we call virtual manipulatives. Virtual manipulatives is defined as interactive dynamic visual models that include pre-made and pre-built support for teaching. So for example, in the school or at home, we can just download apps which are relevant for teaching certain concepts. Or if we just use web-based virtual manipulatives, you can just go to an assess website and use some kind of features of virtual manipulatives there. And last, this slide is not in your PowerPoint, but I want to share some useful website with you. So those screeners, there is no one, like a single screeners are best. However, these are some cited screeners across different researchers and publications. So for example, this is Butterworth screener. So there is off and online version of it, and groups can take this screener for about 30 minutes. And we can ask the different features and mathematical reasoning and mathematical recognition, and also even basic math facts. So today, we went over the definitions, characteristics of dyscalculia, and also some example of best practices for teaching mathematics to our children. So I hope that you consider this is recommendation and research-based ideas and opinions, but we cannot really generalize every single information to all the children. All children have different characteristics, strengths, and weakness. So I want you to take this information as one example and one practices for your children today. Thank you for listening my lecture today.
There we go. Had to get unmuted. Thank you so much, Dr. Shin.
Thank you.
I do see that we have some questions coming in, and obviously if you guys have additional questions, please enter those in the Q&A box as they come in. So let me see. All right, so first question. When students are tested for learning disorders, are they also tested for dyscalculia? Is it within the battery of tests given?
So like that, learning disorder cover the concept of dyscalculia. And learning disorder, the terminology can be considered both clinical and educational terms. So when students get tested and assessed from the schools, it is more likely that we, as one example of like a testing, and they are probably will test it for the dyscalculia when they show some persistence difficulties in math. And when students have testing from the private centers or clinical area, it is more likely that they cover the several concepts of comprehensive cognitive assessment. And also we can consider that dyscalculia is underneath of this learning disorders. So it is possible that they can be tested. Learning disorder that covers the example of dyscalculia. But if you think that you have some like a clear difficulties for dyscalculia, it is like you can also refer to those dyscalculia assessment to those individuals that you are referring to.
All right, perfect. Next question. Many school districts are testing all students for dyslexia at an early age. You may not know the answer to this, but you may have some commentary for it. Why are students not tested for dyscalculia as well?
I think it's, for example, let's say many students have screened for the ADHD and learning disabilities as a general ideas. I will say that because by definition itself, we consider that dyscalculia is like a demonstrated, could be demonstrated through this academic schooling and formal education. Before that, it is likely that it is really under like a representative from the school age or family members. So, and also I agree that there is less emphasis compared to other basic area in ADHD or reading disabilities because there is some relation to the like a policy as well. So now we put a lot of emphasis in basic reading fact. So we have like a screener for dyslexia or reading disabilities in general, but lack of information in the use of math. So probably this could be like a one way of why there is lack of information and the use of accommodation and use of less information for this population. But we should improve them more throughout those years.
All right. What accommodations can you recommend for students with ADHD who are not diagnosed with math dyscalculia but struggle as much with the subject?
So I kind of mentioned that when compared some generic cognitive functioning between individual with math learning disability and who are ADHD, the one particular area that showed difference was metacognition. Metacognition is about executive functioning. So it is about the charge of staff managing the data or staff regulating information. So I would say that providing some self-regulatory strategies or graphic organizers, or let those individuals with ADHD provide some well-structured information or environment at school, we could have more opportunity to let them focus on their learning, even in math.
Okay, question. My daughter is in college. She has dyscalculia, which is giving her problems because she cannot pass college algebra to finish her teaching certificate. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with this issue on a college level?
So it is. There are some cases even in my class that some of my students who never have identified as have any disability, but right now, after entering the college, realize that just went through the difficulties throughout the academic years. So, like a DSM-V even recommended that those individuals who are adults or older than 17 years old, they can still refer to the clinical for the special learning disorder. But you can bring some history of academic difficulties throughout your school years. I assume that those difficulties in math might have manifested throughout the school years, not right now. So you can describe those difficulties and also refer those conditions to the someone. And also, if you are in the college, there might be some disability support center in the university or college or any other support area, depending on the university or colleges. So you can always refer to information there. Also, at the West Texas A&M Council Center for Learning Disability, there is also some useful information and also personnel. So you can always welcome to contact any of us, including me, so we can share more information with you.
Perfect. All right. What are the best tools and accommodations to add to an IEP to help support dyscalculia?
So there are several recommendations that we can use. Even though in a statewide accommodation, there are a lot of use of extended time, but extended time doesn't work for everyone, as you may know. So we should check what preferences or strength or weakness each student have. For example, one of my students' accommodation was providing graphic organizer fill-in help. So some students who need graphic organizer or need support in handwriting. So those accommodations have support in handwriting or provide in a pre-made a lecture note for the class itself can be a good example of accommodation for children with dyscalculia as well.
Okay, perfect. Do you know of any ways of helping college students with MLD?
First of all, I think it's important that having enough time to do those assignments in advance. So I think for the college level, students require a lot of self-independent management skills. So, and also because it is important that managing the time, managing any assignment, and also require collaboration with a team. So I think it is important that having some generic self-regulatory strategies of checking how to do the work together, and also checking the times for each coursework. I think that will be some important skill that some student can really use.
Sure. And I think that these questions kind of go in together. The question is, why are schools hesitant to use dyscalculia on an IEP and instead use specific learning disability? If you could kind of explain the difference between SL and dyscalculia, I think that would be helpful for a few of our questions.
I think dyscalculia is like a terminology covered underneath of special learning disorder. Even though schools do not really say dyscalculia on IEP, when students have IEP goal on math and have IEP goal on mathematical calculation or mathematical problem solving, that means that they cover the concept of dyscalculia on the IEP. Even as I mentioned, we use different terminology because we still do not agree with one clinical term. We use different terminology and different definition across authorities and across countries. But still, you can think that it is covered.
All right. Does mathematical ability develop on the same trajectory as reading among educators? This community of education seems further behind with respect to math interventions.
So I would say it really depends on each individual. However, in the reading development, really depends on student development of their language in addition to their vocabulary, reading comprehension for other basic reading components. But in the part of math is more likely hierarchical concepts. So after students really understand some basic math fact, or after being fluent in the one math concept of addition and subtraction, they can go beyond like multiplication and division. So there is some differences that reading might more likely be related and work all the components together to be fluent in reading. But in math, even though student masters in one particular subject in subtraction or basic facts, but it is possible they still have difficulty in word problem solving, which includes some algebra concept in a higher order thinking. So for the mathematics development, I would say there is some age differences. For the early age, like a kindergarten, we say that there is some fundamental digit number they can easily memorize. So let's say we can easily, students who do not have math difficulty at all can remember 6 digits of numbers easily. However, we cannot really differentiate that when they are in the kindergarten. But after the older and in the secondary level, we rely pretty much on the math concepts related to the content level mathematics, which includes some higher thinking order. So I think when students go beyond their secondary level, the gap between the reading development and math development can vary. And also this can also be varied by each individual as well.
Perfect. Okay. We do have a question down here that I want to get to. Do you have any information regarding when an official definition of dyscalculia will be made? And is the trend that it will be included with the dyslexia handbook as dysgraphia is?
Well, there is no official definition, but I would go formal definition for those international like a disability definition, like I said, ICD-11 and DSM-5. So those definitions include the term dyscalculia when they define and provide some specific example of definition of special learning disorder. So you can think those definition and terms and as one formal example of definition. And yeah, could that be the answer for the last question?
Sure. And then when using the Pfeiffer assessment of mathematics to test for dyscalculia, would it be possible to be identified for procedural and verbal dyscalculia, or should they only have one area that they're identified in?
Mm-hmm. So procedural and verbal dyscalculia is one characteristics. Some students have difficulties in verbal area, verbal task more than non-verbal task, which is about visual and spatial tasks. So it really depends on that, the characteristics of a student, but also however, we should consider different features of each assessment and follow those criteria suggested by each assessment. And there are many questions, so I lost the later part of the question. Could you repeat the later part of the question again?
Yes, we will begin.
Or can you upload it again? I'm scrolling down, but I don't see the question.
Yeah, it's under answered. Sorry, I had already. But is it possible to be identified for procedural and verbal dyscalculia, or should they only have one area which they are identified in?
Mm-hmm. So it's really, we should consider some general deficit across the different tasks. Also, we can also consider particular if a student have particular deficit in each area of assessment. So we should really check one area. We should check one particular area as some individual characteristics, but also some general features as well as the general cognitive performances.
All right. Are there any statistics related to students identified with ADHD and reading dyslexia that show comorbid symptoms of dyscalculia?
Mm-hmm. So there is some references that there are a lot of comorbidity issue between learning disability and ADHD. And also within the learning disabilities, we say about more than 80% student population have issues in reading. So I would say that there will be today I mentioned that the range of comorbidity issue be like a 20 to 40%, but there is some different rate and percentage across different researchers. But definitely there are some high rate of comorbidity between ADHD and reading disabilities as well.
All right. Trying to make it through all these questions. Here we go. My daughter was not diagnosed with dyscalculia until grade 11. Is it true that sometimes students are not diagnosed with dyscalculia until the algebraic concepts are taught? What is the best screening tool or assessment to clearly find this type of disability? And should I ask for a cross battery of assessments?
So the example that I mentioned was those individuals who are in a secondary level. If students are in the early age, definitely their a grade level performances is still with more basic math facts. And we consider that if students really perform way below their chronological age group, that way that even though students have some basic cognitive deficit, they also should manifest if they really follow far behind their age groups or their age level math context. That's why I mentioned about the algebra concepts. And the best screening, I would say there is no single best screener for any kind of assessment, but the example of screening will be the universal screening that each student can be compared as a classroom-wise or school-wise. So we cannot really rely on one single screener, but we can use some recommendation from the well-known authorities. So if you go to the website, there is some several screeners which we call now at school universal screening. So here we take if students have difficulties in like a 15 percentile below than their age group or 20 percentile below their average group. So by comparing students with the standardized test, we can say that these students and have difficulties, and we can also consider some specific math area or cognitive deficit where we should put more emphasis on each student. And for the cross barrier of assessment, I think it really depends on the situation and the context of schools. Some in the previous years, we used some comprehensive cognitive battery, and also schools have used assessment related to the cognitive profiling. But we take the use of cognitive profiling as the pattern of strengths and weakness. So right now, instead of really comparing how far students have deficit in their generic one IQ test, we more likely focus on what particular specific cognitive deficit each student have. For example, it is likely that students who have math calculation difficulties also have difficulty in visual spatial memory. So I would say we could try different assessment, but we should focus on how to interpret the patterns of strength and weakness so that we can prepare way better recommendation to emphasize its intensive intervention for students based on their characteristics.
All right, perfect. We're getting closer to the 1:15, but we're going to try to answer a few more questions. I know they're coming in, but at some point we do have to let Dr. Shin go. So I'll try to ask a few more. Here's one. My child is 12 and exhibits the characteristics of dyscalculia that you described. The school was supposed to test her and concluded she does not have it. We're looking to test her privately. How can I find someone competent to test her? Is there a certification for dyscalculia?
There is, as far as I understand, there is no certification for dyscalculia particularly. However, dyscalculia is considered one type of special learning disorder. So we can say that any certified, like a school psychologist or any, and also who have experiences in diagnosing those individuals who have difficulties in this population will know how to assess and have some quality to do that.
All right. Somebody is asking, can you switch back to the screener slide so that they can see it again?
Okay. Do you mean this one?
Hopefully. It said screener slides. So I'm going to go with that. Yeah.
Is that right?
I believe so. If it's not, I'm sure he will come back.
Okay.
Right. And I have put the link again to the PowerPoint file that's online.
And okay, and somebody else was asking up at towards the top, I don't know exactly where it was, if we could upload the PowerPoint that has
So the last so the last site was useful site that I also referred to today. That is called Dyscalculia Origin. So there are some examples and some video clips that you can also take for your references as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. All right. See what else we got. Okay, here we go. Is small group resource instruction an adequate school-based intervention, or is there a different intervention that the school could use or should use?
Mm-hmm. So small group intervention that we right now use is more like a tier 2 intervention. So since 2004, with the use of IDEA, we try to use some scientifically based intervention. But I would not say every small group intervention is really validated. But when in the small group intervention is considered as in addition to the core tier 2 research-based instruction, and when tier 2 and this small group instruction provide additional intensive support for each student, it could be considered as one example of validated instruction. But I would say that there is no generic small group instruction that is good for everyone, but it is more likely that what instruction is happening or with how many times frequently per day or per week each student gets is more important than just the way of placement itself.
All right. Could you either repeat the website just a minute ago, or can we put it in the chat box possibly so people can get that?
Okay. I will turn it off and then.
Let's share. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Shin, is it the one that's on the bottom of that slide, Dyscalculia.org?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
I sent and shared the
it
together.
Thank you.
And the last slide is just one example from the Baddeley screeners that I screenshot.
Okay, perfect. Now we know where to find that. All right.
Okay, just about at the mark. I want to go ahead and let's write.
Sure. All right. I know we didn't get to everybody's questions today. We had a pretty big influx of questions for Dr. Shin. If you have questions, Dr. Shin is willing to answer those for you, and she shared her contact information on the screen, as well as, feel free to send those my way or to Christina, and we will get you in contact with Dr. Shin or with somebody who can help you with those questions. All right. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is our final webinar for 2019. So we are taking a little bit of a break, giving you guys a little bit of a vacation from my face specifically. I think that we could all use that. But we will pick up after the holidays, and we will get some awesome webinars and everything like that ready for you guys. So be watching your emails for those to be announced, and you can hop on our website to find those as well. And we do thank you for being super loyal webinar viewers. We know that most of you guys have joined us for multiple throughout the last few months, and we really appreciate that. It makes doing our job so worth it. We love you guys, and we're thankful that you come to us for the information that you are seeking. If you have any webinar topics that you would like to see discussed in the next semester, please shoot those my way. My email, as well as Christina's, is on the screen. We love to hear from y'all. We want to know what topics, what information you're seeking so that we can make sure we get that for you. And there's also a link to our statewide webinars page where you can find the recordings of this webinar, as well as all of our previous webinars, and a copy of the PowerPoint presentations. Make plans to join us on Facebook if you haven't already. You can find the link right there. We share some really cool resources. We do some Facebook Lives, all kinds of good information. So please join us on there. Thank you guys for being here today. We really appreciate it. We hope you have a great holiday.